Hey, peace and blessings. It's your brother Asare back with another one. Excuse me. Hey, y'all probably see the title of the video. Gonna get into these Pelagians today. Pelagians, Alexander the Great, and the Egyptian connection. I kind of alluded to this in a previous video as far as talking about the Pelasgians and how they connect to the whole thing with Alexander the Great and him being able to just go into Egypt and kind of take it over without much of a fight. Um, we're gonna kind of get into that, man. First, I want to say appreciate all the support, appreciate everybody who kind of been rocking with me on this. Um, you know, taking advantage of a level of OCD. You know what I mean? I got a level of OCD with this research thing, so y'all ain't got to. So I appreciate y'all rocking with me. This might be one of those ones you kind of got to bring your attention span to, but I promise you won't be disappointed. So we're gonna hop right into this thing. Okay, so just kind of the recap on some of what we kind of discussed in the previous the video and everything like that. So when we talk about human history as we know it right now, you have this point of about 12,000 BC where you get to something called the Younger Dryas, and even before that, you got what they call the Older Dryas or whatever. But long story short, around this time of 12,000 BC, you run into a brick wall of human history with where there's really no written records prior to that point or anything like that or whatever case may be, and you run into a period where it's the end of the last ice age. You change from the Pleistocene to the Heliocene and everything like that. So when you run into that brick wall in time or whatever, that's the springing forth of certain civilizations or whatever case may be. And if you study the pattern, migration patterns or whatever of previous civilizations, or whatever case may be, they end at that point or whatever case may be. So prior to that point, that's what the Bible refers to as the flood. That's the biblical flood. If there was ever a period of time where the whole planet would have flooded, it would have been around that time, around that 12,000 BC period of time. So there are various flood stories all over the world, or whatever the case may be. All right, so before we start getting into this whole Pelagian thing or whatever case may be, I want to draw your attention to this, just this mindset and kind of how things have been framed up, right? So in Greek myth, like how we talked about in previous episodes. Okay, in Greek mythology, you're gonna get into Greek mythology is written down around 700 BC, right? When Hesiod writes the Theogony, he writes down the Theogony is the birth of the gods. You see what I'm saying? Later on, Ovid writes something or whatever case may be. So it's sort of like their Bible or whatever case may be. All the stories of Greek mythology in order or whatever case may be. So when Hesiod writes the Theogony, that's kind of like the birth of the Hellenistic Greek culture that we know of today or what have you. And no coincidence in this Hellenistic culture of Greeks that we know of today, they don't have a mythology. They borrowed their mythology from Phoenician, and as we're gonna see in this discourse, Pelasgians, or the Pelasgians were the Greek Ethiopians that were in Greece prior to them. We know that because we call them Ethiopians because, like we discussed on previous videos and everything like that, Ethiopian has nothing to do with burnt faces. That's a misnomer. It's Ophion, Ophion, as in the female deity, Ophion as a male deity, and specifically speaking of which, Ophion was a deity that was brought to the forefront by the Pelasgians themselves. So that's a Pelagian deity or whatever. So when we say Ethiopian, Ophion, they have a culture of worship of the mother and child. So when we get into all these ancient cultures or whatever case may be, they're gonna have a mother deity, a great mother of some sort, and then they're going to have her son or whatever case may be. Now, the archetypical first iteration of that we understand would be in Anubia as far as Satuk and Typhon, and we did a whole video about that. I think a couple months ago or whatever in regards to the Typhonian religion and everything like that. I think they have a whole Typhonian order. Kenneth Grant talks about, he's like the head of that or whatever case may be before he passed. But yeah, so they have the whole Typhonian thing. Typhonian is synonymous with Sabaean. Sabaean is synonymous with Cushite. You see what I'm saying? Sabaean refers to star worship. If we go back into Gerald Massey's Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, he talks about four phases of development of culture in ancient Egypt. He talks about the first one being the Sabaean phase, the second one being the lunar phase, the third one being the solar lunar phase, and the fourth one being the solar phase, which is the most recent one. How we know that Jesus Christ is a solar deity. So, with all that being said, as we go back into so when we hear a story about a great flood, like a great flood, not a minor flood, but because there are many minor floods, but hear stories about a great flood or whatever, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be talking about this great deluge that happened in or around 12,000 BC, that corresponds with the Younger Dryas. So we just want to kind of lay down that context first before we get into anything like that, anything else. Now, so now that we laid that down, so yes, in Greek mythology, the stories that they're telling are older than the people telling the stories. These people in 700 BC are writing about people that whose history goes back to and beyond this 12,000 BC period. How do we know that? Because Greek mythology talks about titans. When we get back further into the Ethiopian thing, like the Adites, the Thamudites, all these lost cities, Atlantis of the Sands, and all these cities with all this megalithic building and stuff like that, and ancient Arabian stuff like that, Baalbek and all that stuff like that. We get we get into stories of giants, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit further when we get into this some of this cyclopean masonry in Macedonia and everything like that, or whatever. But we kind of just painting the picture or whatever case may be. So when they talk about a great flood, they're talking about pretty much around 12,000 BC or whatever case may be. The stories of Greek mythology or whatever case may be are much older than the Greeks, the Hellenistic Greeks, or people being called that wrote the stories down or whatever. They're recording stories that existed a long, long time ago prior to them being in that place or whatever case may be. By the people called the Pelasgians. Pelasgians are understood to be a prehistoric group of people, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. so, so if okay, so the Pelasgians are Ethiopians, Sumerians are Ethiopians, Nubians are Ethiopians, Egyptians are Ethiopians, the original Celts are Ethiopians. We kind of covering all our bases here, whatever case may be. So everybody got this flood story. So it's a whole group of people. Um, like I says, if anybody's familiar with some of the so-called Sumerian mythology or whatever, where you have a particular deity to come down, and then he has a family of kids and stuff like that, and then he bequeaths them different portions of the earth, but they all still do their thing up under the banner of one family or whatever. It sort of sound like kind of like that when we talk about the Ethiopia thing, don't it? But I'm not gonna put that sauce on it for you. I'm gonna let y'all do that. But okay, let's go. When we get into this Greek mythology thing or whatever case may be, yes, the Greeks do have a version of Noah. Oh, okay. So what's going to come up is the question is, okay, when we talk about the Greek version of Noah, right? Deucalion is an individual by the name of Deucalion. Deucalion is Noah as far as the Greeks are concerned. In the Bible we call it Noah. Prior to that, in the Sumerian story, it's Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, Zusudra. It's several iterations of that Noah character or whatever case may be. So in Greece, it's Deucalion. Deucalion is Noah. He has a son called Helen, not Helen. Helen's the female. Helen would be a female name. Helen, you feel me? Okay, who has three sons, Ion, Dorian, and Xuthus. Xuthus has two sons. One of them's adopted. I can't remember which one's adopted. Um, Aeolian and Archaean. All right. These are considered to be the four tribes of original Greeks. So you got the Ionians, the Dorians, the Aeolians, and the Archaeans. Those are the four original tribes of Greeks. And if anybody remembers the five orders of architecture, hint, hint, you see what I'm saying? The Ionic and Doric are two types of pillars. Those are four out of the five types of architecture. And that's a whole nother long conversation right there. But these are the four tribes of original Greeks, right? So Okay, this story sounds very similar to the Noah, Utnapishtim, and Zusudra story of Middle East and Levant region, as mentioned in the Bible, the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So this is that same story. Okay, so in the Bible you have Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? And according to them, they give birth to all of humanity and stuff like that. Okay, one guy of one race gives birth to three sons of three different races, and they give birth to all of humanity. Sounds real weird, but we're gonna go with it. So, yeah. So that's the Noah story or whatever. And Noah, he has three sons. In the Greek version of the story, you have Deucalion, who survives the flood. He gives birth to Helene, which is his son or whatever, and Helene gives birth to three sons, and one of those sons has two sons, and those become your four tribes. So it's a few more twists and turns in the Greek story or whatever case may be, but we looking at the same story, a story of the flood, and a dude comes out of the flood and he has children and they repopulate the earth or whatever case may be. So um if Greek mythology is borrowed from Ethiopian mythology, then the Helen of the story um that the later Hellenistic Greeks from 700 BC identified with um, would have actually been a Pelasgian or Ethiopian European if this is the same global flood circa 12,000 BC. So in 12,000 BC, if there was a Noah person who came out of a flood in this region of the world in Europe or whatever case may be, he would have been a Pelasian. He would not have been the people who we today know as the Hellenistic Greeks or whatever case may be. And so the very person that the Hellenistic Greeks are named after, Helen, would have actually been a Pelasian, like what we're talking about here. Okay, so if this is the same flood and variations of the same story, then why is one applied to a specific region? So why so if I'm Noah, if I just survived a great flood and I'm the only person here, me and my wife or whatever case may be, if we the only people here or whatever, and we got the task of repopulating the whole planet, if I'm Noah, I'm Noah. So why is Deucalion and Helen, why are they just giving birth to the four tribes of Greeks, but Noah is giving birth to all of humanity? Why is that? And it's the same story. That don't make sense. So let's kind of get into that a little bit. Okay, so if this is the same flood, okay, da 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 da. Okay, if this is the same flood and the variations of the same story, then why is one applied to a specific region while the others apply to humanity as a whole? Even Greeks are identified with Japheth. So biblically, Greeks are identified with Japheth, right? Okay, one of Noah's sons. Okay, so why don't Deucalion's descendants repopulate the earth? If you are Noah, then the same role would fit. If I'm Noah, then I'm Noah. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so the reason for this is if you look up in Wikipedia, and we're just going on Wikipedia. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but it's just something quick everybody got access to. So Wikipedia, biblical terminology for race. Okay. Um, let's see here. Uh Flavius Josephus in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, was the first known author who assigned known ethnicities to some of the names listed in Genesis chapter 10. His assignment became the basis for most later authors. So where they get this whole thing about assigning the Semites, the Hamites, the Japhethites, and all this stuff like that, that's Genesis chapter 10, in what they call in the Table of Nations. And even the term before Christ, as it applies, originally came into being around 731 AD by English monk Bede in his book Ecclesiastical History of the English People. So all of these are more recent notions. What I'm trying to get you to understand is there's been a certain frame that's kind of been put on our thinking or whatever case may be. When you really view the ancient world, you got to kind of take that frame off because that frame didn't exist. When we start talking about the Pelagians and you can't, oh man, those were Hamitic and those were this, that, to be truthful, that kind of don't apply. But you know, to keep going. Okay, Hebrews don't have a creation story, right? So when you research the story of the Hebrew faith and Yahweh and all that stuff like that, they didn't start off purely monotheistic or whatever. It was a process for them to become monotheistic. Yahweh starts off as a war god and everything like that. Yahweh don't get all these universal attributes until after they leave Babylon. When they go in captivity up under Nebuchadnezzar, in Babylon and everything like that, and then they come out of Babylon, then their religion has changed. Yahweh has been merged with El, and now Yahweh has all these universal attributes, and now they have a creation story. Prior to that, there was no creation story for the Hebrews. You see what I'm saying? So all that 7 days of creation, on the first day, God spoke in the beginning, God said this and said that. That's Babylonian stuff. That's a Sumerian creation story. So again, this ain't to convert nobody to or away from nothing. I really could care less what you believe in, as long as you ain't out robbing liquor stores or something. I really don't care. But this is for the mature mind. You see what I'm saying? If you really, we trying to get to the bottom of some of this stuff so we can understand. Okay, so Hebrews don't have a creation story. They got that while in bondage in Babylon. Babylon. The Babylonian creation story is a Sumerian creation story. Sumerians are Cushites, Ethiopians, much like the Pelasgians who inhabited Greece. Greek mythology is Pelasgian, Ethiopian mythology. Bible talks about giants, no because the Bible is the cliff notes for these older civilizations material. So the Bible talks about giants. No coincidence that there are titans in Greek mythology. And the further and further back we go in our research, we keep running into um, giants and things of that nature. Because when we go past this mark of 12,000 BC or whatever, the earth is different. The earth prior to 12, and it's so funny because I know I hear all my people online talking about their Princess of Lemuria and they channeled this and channeled that, but I don't hear nobody talking about like um there's some of the stuff I'm running into my research. I don't hear nobody talking about no giants. Everybody channeling Lumeria and all that, but I don't hear nobody running talking about no giants. I don't hear nobody talking about no pygmies. I don't hear nobody talking about nothing. So, you know, it gotta line up with actual reality. So so we're dealing with let's see, in these stories, Noah and Deucalion, we're dealing with two groups of people telling two versions of the same event, referring to the flood circa 12,000 BC. I think I think the distinction Helen, or being named after that particular person was originally to designate specifically post-flood people. Helen births the Greek Shem, the Greek equivalent of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You see what I'm saying? So if we run with the idea that all these various civilizations were Ethiopian, it makes it more make more sense when you have stories such as the Anunnaki story, where you have a family of gods coming down and an elder of them dividing up the territory to his various children, each ruling as god of his respective domain, but still identifying with the larger family, Othean. So that's the first part that we wanted to kind of get out. We just kind of wanted to lay that down as far as the Pelagians are concerned. I'm going to get into some bibliography real quick. Okay, so we're going to get into some of this bibliography. Now, normally I have some hard copy in my hand so I can go through. That's kind of like how I like my books. But for this occasion, this book is going to be off the internet. This book is written by a guy named Basil Chulev. Um, the book is called Pelasgians, the archaic mythical Pelasgo, stork people from Macedonia. Okay, this book was written in 2013. Now, I will say this about this book. You know what I mean? My hat goes off to the guy for the research he did, putting this together. I agree with a lot of the points that he's making in the book. Um, the only thing what he's doing, he's trying to make the Pelagians like the ancestors of Europeans and stuff like that, like the Aryans of the mythos and stuff like that. But if anything, this kind of confirms, like, kind of it goes into a lot of the things that we've been previously talking about. From my understanding, um, it confirms the idea that Aryan comes from Kabari, like the giants, the Kabari. He goes into the mythos of the people on Samothrace, the Isle of Samothrace, and everything like that, or whatever case may be. If you look at some of the pottery and stuff like that from the Isle of Samothrace, some of the Pelagian stuff from the Isle of Samothrace. It has a lot of swastikas and things like that on it, or whatever case may be. But how we been talking about, they follow the migration patterns of the Twa and everything like that, and they're pretty much they fit all the criteria that we've been talking about for the other Ethiopians. But I would say he puts out some interesting research in his book. Let's get into it. Okay, this is gonna be page 6. A proposed ancient etymology links Pelasgo, Belesgo to Pelargo, stork, and postulates that the Pelasgians were actually the stork people. In the Macedonian language, Pelasgian also flexes between Macedonic pelican, i.e., pelican, and Velican, the great, in plain Macedonian, and due to the convergence of V to B and vice versa, Pelasgian also interchanges into Pelasgian, white, pale, same as the stork and pelican. So he makes a lot of parallels with the modern Macedonian language because like how we talk about Alexander the Great. I know y'all probably, man, we 20 minutes in, you ain't said much about Alexander the Great. Okay, Alexander the Great is a Macedonian. So Macedonia is supposed to be like one of the headquarters of the places, the centers for this Pelagian um empire as it were. So we're gonna keep going. Also, is noteworthy to mention that he talks about the stork. You see what I'm saying? And I ain't even gonna try to hold my phone up. I know y'all probably can't see my phone, but he talks about the stork. Google the stork and see the similarities between the stork and the ibis bird. The stork that they talking about, the pelican, what have you, it looks exactly or very similar to the ibis bird, the Egyptian ibis bird, or whatever case may be. So we're gonna keep going. Okay, so this is going to be page 9. All ancient writers concur in ascribing a pelagic origin to many of the most ancient tribes of Italy too, and there seems no reason to doubt that a large part of the population of the Apenninic Peninsula was really of pelagic origin. That is to say that it belonged to the same great nation or family which forged the original population of the Peloponnese as well as the Epirus and Macedonia, and of a part of at least of Thrace and Asia Minor. So it's talking about how far spread out that they were, and even the ancient tribes of Rome, they constituted a lot of them as well. As we're gonna see, going into a lot of this, I'm not gonna get into all of it, but going into a lot of it, you're gonna see a lot of these words that we're gonna run into, like even Peloponnesian, like Peloponnese or whatever case may be, is derived from a derivative of Pelagian. You see what I'm saying? So we're gonna keep going. Okay, page 9. There's no definite clue of how far the Pelagio-Proto-Macedonian tribes have reached and with their migrants. However, it is evident from the wide diffusion of their remains and artifacts that the people who produce these megalithic works were ones who must have possessed in their time great political power around the basin of the Eastern Mediterranean. Wave after wave, they made their way into Europe and Asia Minor Peninsula, and with time they multiplied and divided into numerous tribes: Pelagians, Phrygians, Brygians, and Macedonians. In turn, were the dominant tribes, and after each one, in turn, came other tribes, perhaps different in origin, who called by new names those who preceded them. A new study of DNA recovered from a ancient Philistine site in the Israeli city of Ascalon confirms what we already knew from the Bible and other ancient sources that the origin of the Philistines is Southern Europe. So that kind of corresponds with some information we were talking about in a previous video. We were talking about the Hyksos and the kings of Kasut and everything like that in the book for Crete to Egypt, Missing Links of the Rig Veda by Dr. Lenny Srinivasan. We were talking about how the word, even in India, how you have Kartakia or the word Krita. You see what I'm saying? Krita, even in India, means Crete. It refers to the Isle of Crete. So there's remnant of a migration pattern that goes from Europe down into that way. Anyway, so moving right along in ancient times, because we always have to like make that distinction. Because I put it to you like this: if okay, if I'm a people that exist in a place, um, or we migrated there at 50 AD. If I go back to that same place at 50 BC, I'm not gonna find remnants of my people just because I'm there at 50 AD. So that's just to point that out. It's moving right along. All right, we're going to start off in page 11. It appears, however, to be a fact established that the Semitic Hellenes were not at all the first who occupied so called Greece. They were preceded by a number of autochthonous tribes, all apparently of Pelasgian origin. Um, Thucydides uh, explicitly speaks of the name Hellas being a comparatively recent date and of the Pelagic name being the most prevalent among the tribes of, of the Macedonian Peninsula. But this does not account for the Pelagi being found in Asia, and for their having introduced Macedonian rites in Asia Minor. But who and what the Pelagians were, how and whence they appeared around the Aegean, and by the gradations and influences that were ripened into the Hittites, Phrygians, Mycenaeans, and Macedonians, are questions to which no satisfactory answer has been given, but must still be discussed wherever the results of the investigation may be. Pelagians have produced the Mycenaean remains found in the Isle of Crete, as in the Mycenae itself. In Peloponnese, too, there lived a race antecedent to the Achaeans and the Dorians. The Achaeans and Dorians are two of the four original tribes of Greeks, whom the ancients knew under the name Pelagi. To venture to write about this race is enough to bring down on the writer grave suspicion that he is one of whom deal with druids and who see in the Great Pyramid the key of mystic systems of chronology and astrology. So basically saying among the academic his academic peers, the guy who writes this, we'll quote him in a minute, his academic peers or whatever, if he mentions the Pelagians and stuff like that, they're gonna treat him like he talking about leprechauns or something like that. Okay, so accordingly, with a view to showing that a man may believe in historical reality of the Pelagi and may be safely still be allowed to mix with his neighbors, and let me say that I can quote the opinions of four historians whose skepticism or sober mindfulness no one has yet called into question, and this is Niebuhr Thurwall, uh, uh, Asclepius in the 6th century BC, included under the name of Pelagi all the Aegean as far as Larissa and Pharsala. That Herodot states that whole southern Macedonian peninsula was anciently called Pelagia. So all of the Greek peninsula was called Pelagia at one point, according to him. Okay, let's see here. And that he included under the common name of Pelagians the Athenian, the Arcadian, the Ionian of Asia Minor, the Limnian, the Lesbian, the Samothracian, and the people of Imbos and Crestion. So he included all those people and he listed them as Pelagians. So as you can see, the Pelagians are kind of bleeding into those original four tribes, like how we talking about. He listed Ionians as Pelagians or whatever catch may be. So that's kind of bleeding into your four tribes of Greeks. So as we can see, this is one of the reasons why, Alexander being a Macedonian, um, can go into Egypt at a particular time, because these Macedonians tied to these Pelasgians. Pelasgians are Ethiopians, like what we're talking about, just like the Egyptians are Ethiopians. So there's some sort of relation there, or whatever case may be. So we're gonna keep going. All right, page 16. The term Pelagian or Pelagio was used in the classical source to denote prehistoric people in the Macedonian Peninsula, Aegean Islands, Crete, and beyond. So the same people that we were talking about in the previous video, Kings of Kasut, in that book From Crete to Egypt, Missing Links to the Rig Veda. Remember, the author was kept referring to the people in that region as pre-Greek Mycenaean. In this book, he talks about the term pre-Greek Mycenaean is linked to Pelagian, just like how I said before I even read this. Okay, so keep going. Uh, Pelagians in ancient mythology was considered, according to Asius, to be the very first man, the son of the mother god. Okay, the very first man. Okay, when we were at Pygmy Katabu, we were reading about Ife. Ife was said to be the very first man, or whatever the case may be. So we just contrasting that. Okay, so Pelagius, the son, sometimes of Amun, sometimes of Poseidon, sometimes of Triops or Anacus, Lycan, or Pelasgian, or of the earth itself, derived the name of the Pelagi. Okay. Let's see. Bringing a beautiful gift, the earth made the first man, the first human being, the divine Pelagius. He was the mythological epitomal ancestor of the first people too. The first people, kind of like the Twa was the first people, but we're gonna move along. Okay. Pelagians or Yoti, the ancestral prehistoric inhabitants of the Macedonian peninsula. All right, page 16. They were the same Neolithic people who worshiped the Great Mother. Same thing we talk about. That's the criteria for being Ethiopian. And we talked about, okay, the same Neolithic people who worshiped the Great Mother, Mo, i.e., mom, mother, the sun god, Ile, hence the word Illyrian, worshippers of El, Il, Ile, um, Dionys, i.e., Serapis, Osiris, Amun, Selenos, and other divinities, and who built the ancient sanctuaries at Agi, Delphi, Dion, Dodona, and Samothrace. Samothrace is the Kabari, the people who worship the Kabari. The Kabari is a whole other pantheon of deities or whatever that were instituted by um, the Pelagians. The worship of Zeus comes from the Pelagians as well. That's another reason why we consider them to be Ethiopian, because originally Zeus is Zeus Ethiops. We know that. Okay, keep going. Okay, this is page 18. Okay, Herodot called them the eldest inhabitants of the world. He who knows the cult of Samothrace attributes its foundation to the Pelagian people, thus connecting the Dionysic mysteries back to archaic times. And we say the Twa was first of all people, and they dealt heavily with Osiris, but we're gonna keep going. Okay, its foundation to the Pelagian people, thus connecting the Dionysic mysteries back to the archaic times and to a people who preceded the so-called Greeks, to do the statues of Hermes with the right member, uh, uh, the Greeks. The statue of Hermes with the right member, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they found some statues at Gobekli Tepe like that. Um, let's see, but moving right along, have not learned from the Egyptians, but from the Pelasgians. Okay, so he's saying that the Greeks didn't learn from the Egyptians, they learned from the Pelasgians, but they have a lot of Egyptian iconography in Greek stuff because, again, the Pelasgians and the Egyptians are both Ethiopians, as we've said. When we go back to videos where we talked about OG Kush, talked about ancient Ethiopia. We've done several videos like that, so you can go back and kind of see what we're talking about on that. So the Greeks didn't learn from the Egyptians, but from the Pelasgians. It was the Athenians to adopt this use, and the other from them. The Athenians, in fact, had already numbered when the Pelasgians came to live together in their new territory, and since then, also the Pelasgians began to be considered Greeks. Anyone who is initiated into the mysteries of the Kabari, again, we talk about the Kabari again, that the inhabitants of Samothrace celebrate and that they have adopted from the Pelasgians. Okay, because remember we talked in the Twa say they were seafaring people. Then we talk about the ancient Ethiopians sailing all the way around the world. We talk about the Phoenicians being a remnant of them and everything like that. So we come in with a lot of these same themes for these ancient civilizations or whatever. Pelagians, he knew what I say. Those Pelagians who came to live with the Athenians lived previously in Samothrace, and it is from them that the inhabitants have learned the mysteries of Samothrace. So the Athenians made the statues of Hermes with the member straight, of which they learned from the Pelasgians. The Pelasgians about it handed down a sacred story that is revealed during the mysteries of Samothrace. So that comes up again. Um, Okay, and this is the author puts this in here. The Greek, the same page, page number 18. The Greeks were and still are ignorant of their origin. They neither knew whence their ancestors had come, nor when they had established themselves in Greece, nor what they had done there. To preserve the exact memory of things as they occur, there is need of some means of fixing them. But the Greeks did not know how to write. They did not employ writing until about the 8th century BC. It's kind of like what we've been talking about this whole time. They had no way of calculating the number of years. Later, they adopted the use of the counting the years according to the great feast, which was celebrated every 4 years at the Olympiad. A period of 4 years was called the Olympiad, but the Olympiad was placed in 776 BC, and the chronology of the Greeks does not rise beyond this date. History of Ancient Civilization, 1912, by Charles Signabos. Okay. All right, this is page 19. To the Pelagians have been assigned the masonry of the Cyclopean ancient ruins. Okay, so I run across stuff where it says, I know Perseus is a Pelagian, but I run across stuff where it says that he employed Cyclops to build this, and the Pelagians didn't build it themselves or whatever. I've heard different versions of the story, so you be the judge. Your research, however it may go. But to the Pelagians have been assigned the masonry of Cyclopean ancient ruins made of large and massive stones across the Macedonian peninsula, Asia Minor, Chaldea, and as far as India. The oldest ruins of this civilization are several ancient citadels and walls of Tirinth, the immense stones used in the construction of which puzzles the archaeologists. They were believed to be works of a race of giants, the Pelagos or Cyclops, and the work was thence called Cyclopean. They are now legitimately ascribed to the Pelagians, who are mythologically considered to be the first people of the Macedonian Peninsula and wider Eastern European region. Okay, and then he talks about the Cyclopean walls were called Pelargicon, stork walls. You see what I'm saying? All right, so it said, okay, so page 22, the Proto-Macedonic Pelagian civilization was contemporary with the Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Egyptian, and Assyrian greatness, and probably even with the later years of Chaldean greatness. Let's see, Pelagians with Sidonians to aid them in the artistic culture were all powerful in the region before the year 1500 BC. So we talk about the year 1500 BC. That's around the time of the Hyksos expulsion. All that happens nearing around that time, or whatever the case may be. They have reigned in Europe even before this date. It was the cradle of European civilization too, as we know it today. So yeah, we getting into the Pelagians and around the time that they held sway. So remember, we have this catastrophe, something that happens around 1100 BC, but he still talks about um, um, where a lot of these civilizations fell and everything like that. But he solidly says around 1500 um, BC was a point until they held sway up until that point. Okay, so this is page 27. Pelagians founded Rome too. According to the legend, Arcadian nymph Nicostrate prostrated her son Evander persuaded her son Evander to murder his father. And when the Arcadians banished them both, they escaped across the Adriatic to Italy, accompanied by a body of Pelagians. There, some 60 years before the Trojan War, they founded the small city of Palantium, um, on the hill beside the river Tiber, later called Mount Palatine, today's center of the city Rome. The site having been Nicostrate's choice, and soon there was no more powerful king than Evander in all of Italy. According to the Romans, Hercules freed King Evander from the tribute owed to the Etruscans. You see what I'm saying? So if anybody's familiar with the story of Rome, Romulus and Remus come up out of their descendants of the Trojan War. They're descendants of the people who escaped the Trojan War, according to the story or whatever. But what she's talking about, there was a contingent of Pelagians who went with this the mother of King Evander and everything like that. Um, to the area that would become Italy and everything like that, or become Rome and everything like that. So it's an interesting story. Even the Pelasians have a hand in that. He goes on down a little bit further. He talks about the how the Pelagians fought on the side of King Priam in the Trojan War. So that's another thing how they're interwoven into the mythos of a lot of the stories in Greek in the Greek mythos. All right, it's page 30 on the other side of the geographical names with Pelagian origin survived until today in toponyms of numerous locations across the mainland of Macedonia. So we talked about that on previous videos when we were going into the missing links or the Red Veda. We were talking about toponymical names. You might have people in mythology sometimes that are named after places. And sometimes the names of those places get transferred over multiple languages, but it'll still have the same meaning of place. You see what I'm saying? So this is slightly different. This is names that derive from the word Pelagius or Pelagian. Okay, so you have uh, Pelagonia, plain, Pella, city, city of, or Pelikos, mountain in Mysia, Pelina, town in Thessaly, Pelican, city of, Pelister is a mountain in Macedonia, Pelinitsa or Belanicia, that's a mountain, Belazora, city of, let's see here, um, Peloponnese, Mount Pelion. You see what I'm saying? Let's see here. All these uh, places. Okay, so that's not even closely another similar region to be found anywhere with such an obvious and omnipresent Pelagian toponymy like the numerous names of the Macedonian peninsula. So they were heavy in Macedonia and in that whole peninsula. Like we said, that was called Pelagia at one time, according to this author. So we're gonna keep going. Okay, so this is page 32. Okay, in different parts of okay, so now he's going to talk about their religion. Okay, and remember what we talked about in previous videos about how Ethiopians, they're named Ethiopians, Ethiopian, based on their religion. So let's get into this. Okay, in different parts of the Macedonian Peninsula, once and now occupied by Pelasians, there existed different mythological traditions to the origin and eponymous connection with Pelagius. Now who we finna see who Pelagius is. Okay, he gonna be a familiar person like we talked about before. Okay, it becomes an all-inclusive term for any archaic and presumably autochthonous, thus pre-Hellenic people in the ancient Macedonic Urmat around the Aegean Sea. The theonym name of Pelagians, Pelagi, Pelagati, Pelagari, was unanimously used by ancient writers to generally describe the first people, i.e., the oldest population of the Macedonian peninsula that preceded the Trojan War. To the Pelagians are alleged the emergence of the Phrygians, Paeonians, Pannonians, Pelagians, and finally the birth of the Macedonian nation under King Caran, later King Caranus, around the 9th century BC. So right um, prior to um, the time when Hesiod writes the Theogony. Um, as the oldest people, Pelagians were surely responsible for the oldest myths, right? Let's say that again. So, as the oldest people, Pelagians were surely responsible for the oldest myths. So, even though Hesiod writes the Theogony at 700 BC, the Pelagians been there since before this 12,000 BC span of time that we're talking about. You see what I'm saying? So everything you're reading about that they talking about the Titans and Zeus and all that stuff like that, they talking about the same stuff that they talking about in Mesopotamia. These are the same group of people. This is just a different region and they have a different flavor to their mythos or whatever, but they telling the same story in essence. And I think we track that through multiple videos at this point. So let's keep going. Okay, Okay, so as the oldest people, Pelagians were surely responsible for the oldest myths and traditions too, and consequently for the oldest forms of religion. The Pelagian spiritual stratum of the early Bronze Age, succeeded by the long shot, the later classical pantheons of the Aegean and wider Mediterranean, and its traces are present everywhere. So basically, everybody who came after them adopted their mythology. So that's inclusive of your Romans, of your of your Hellenistic Greeks, and it blended and meshed so well with the Egyptian religion or whatever because everybody was an Ethiopian, so all of their religions kind of blended in together. So let's keep going. One of the main features was the late Mediterranean and its traces of present era. One of the main features was the late Neolithic matriarchy. Can we say that again? The late Neolithic matriarchy, and then we say this the Typhonian Sabaean thing deals with the matriarchal concept. It deals with the mother and child concept, the seven stars and the seven sisters and all this stuff like that, and the one son, which being Satuk and everything like that in the Egyptian concept or whatever case may be. But it follows this same stellar mythos, and all of that is synonymous with Cush. Okay, so let's keep going. One of the main features is the Neolithic matriarchy, which is found as the characteristic, omnipresent, and key feature in Pelagian religion. The Kabari and the Eleusinian mysteries were another prehistoric aspect of the Pelagian beliefs transmitted and adopted by later religions. You see what I'm saying? So basically, that's everything. He just summed up pretty much what I talked about in about 5 videos or more. So yeah. So we're gonna keep going. Okay. So when we start to get into that, what we just talked about, okay, this is where the story of Ophion and Aronimi comes from. You see what I'm saying? The story of Ophion and Orunmimi comes out of the Pelagian. That's a Pelagian creation story and stuff like that. Okay, similar to Sut and Typhon, like how we talked about on previous videos in the Egypto-Nubian religion, because mother and child worship. Did he just say that's a constant staple in their belief system? Mother and child worship is Ophion. You feel what I'm saying? As in Ethiopian, not burnt faces. So that's the common theme that we're talking about. So let's keep going. Okay, so this is gonna be on page 32. Okay, so blah blah blah. Okay, the first man was Pelagius, ancestor of the Pelagians. He emerged from the soil of Arcadia, immediately followed by other men to whom Pelagius taught how to make huts and how to feed on acorns and sew garments of pigskin similar to those who still wears the people of the country and in Euboea and Phios. Okay, the first god man Pelagius was also known as Uranus. Okay, then we say Uranus tied in with Ophion, and don't we say Ophion is one of the components of the word Athophian or Ethiopian, right? So let's keep going. All right, so the first god man Pelagius was also known as Uranus, the primordial skyfather god. The size of his body, his strength and beauty surpassed that of all the other mortals. Together with the gifts of his soul, he was also the celestial bull Taurus that funcates the earth, i.e. Gaia. Thence his second name, Uranus, thus Taurus bull. He was the first to teach humans to build houses, to make clothes, and he forbade them to continue eating green leaves, weeds, and roots, some of which were incredible, inedible, and others dangerous to the health, allowing them only the use of acorns of the oak for eating. Right? According, according to Asclepius, all right, Pelagius was the son of Gaia, the earth, but according to others, Gaia was his wife, with whom he had a daughter, Rhea, that's Cronus' wife. According to the grammarian Apollodorus, Pelagius was the forefather of the Titans. Other ancient authors, um, let's see here, mention that Pelagius was the first ancestor of the Hyperboreans because he talks about the Hyperboreans that's beyond the north wind or as it's called, whatever. He says that in this book he says that Hyperboreans refers to Mount Borea, and they're talking about Macedonia is what he's talking about in this book, which is an interesting thing. Okay, so let's see here. Near the Atlas Mountains. According to Diodorus, Oranos' reign extended especially over the western and northern parts of the ancient world, especially at Dodonia, one of the sacred Pelagian cities. Oranos was also venerated under the name Zeus Anaxi Pelagios, right? Okay, so again, we were talking about Uranus syncretizes with Ophion, who syncretizes with the original version of Satuk, who syncretizes with Sumerian Anu. And this is just syncretizing it. You put whatever sauce you want on it, but I'm just telling you what it syncretizes with because these are the same people. They're just different branches of the same people, as if somebody in the same family say, "Hey man, you take this piece, you take that piece of land, you take that piece of land, and y'all run it." So I'm just saying that's what it looks like. Okay, but we're gonna keep moving. According to the ancient traditions, the reign of Uranus, i.e., Pelagius, and his pastoral tribes had extended from northern Europe to southern areas and beyond the Mediterranean to the plains of the Nile. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so this is a person we talking about that's an ancient person that all these people are named after or have an association with, and he ruled a large swath of land according to these collection of stories that we've been reading over numerous videos, right? Okay, so and beyond the Mediterranean to the plains of the Nile, it was worth mentioning that the Pelasgians had been the only people of the ancient world to which was attributed a divine origin. Don't all the Ethiopians say that they descend from the gods, right? Okay, so probably due to their extraordinary intelligence, their moral and physical qualities, and their amazing deeds and works, they were the divine heirs of the Pelagius Uranus, right? Let's keep going. Okay, we're gonna kind of round this out. Okay, but last little piece is page 35. The common background beyond the Pelagians for various cults and legends related to Ceres, huh? Ceres, like you mean Ceres, like how we talking about Ordinus and Ophion is similar to Satuk in Egypt and Nubia, and how the original form of Satuk was associated with the dog star Ceres, huh? That what we talking about? But yeah, so to commence background beyond the Pelagians for various cults and legends related to Ceres, Atlantis, and the Garden of Hesperides, the lore about the eternal spring and the paradise on earth. We seeing a lot of these same themes. All right. Poseidon, Pleiades, Athena, Perse, and the Amazons and Atlas. All these mythos right here was associated with the Pelagians. In this last little piece I'm gonna go into, he just glosses over the Kabari or the Kabiri. It's spelled Kabiri. Sometimes in some places it's spelled Kabeiri or Cabeiri. They were the mysteries, festivals, and orgies solemnized in all places in which the Pelagians Kabiri, the upper, greater gods, were worshipped, but especially in Samothrace, Imbros, Lemnos, Thebes, Amthidon, Pergamus, and Bertus. Little is known respecting the rites observed in these mysteries, as no one was allowed to divulge them or pronounce the personal names of the Kabiri. It is known that they were numbered a total of 12 gods. So yeah, so that's kind of what we wanted to do. We just wanted to kind of do a little dive into the Pelagians and kind of like couple this with what we talked about on the previous video with the kings of Kasut. It's just to kind of like flesh that out just a tad bit more or whatever the case may be. Um, yeah, we got a lot more deep dives to do, a lot more of this ancient world to kind of get into, man. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me for this last hour and everything like that. Y'all could have been anywhere in the world, but y'all chose to kick with me on this you know, Saturday evening. So y'all like what y'all been hearing, like and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Peace and love, man.